To close a gap with an invisible stitch, you're going to need to have thread that's a matching colour to your material. In this instance, I'm going to sew down the openings of my belt tube so that my belt buckle will always be flush and none of the elastic will poke out. So get yourself a hand needle and you'll notice there's a groove. If you follow that groove, your thread will slide through into the hole of the needle very easily. So point your thread up towards the gap of the needle eye, not down towards the point of the needle, and it should just fall into that groove. Then you want to tie a knot at the base of your thread and snip it to keep it neat. To start your sewing off, you need to secure your thread. That's why you've got a knot, but you need to find a gap where that knot's not going to stick out and be obvious. So I'm just going inside here. And my knot won't be so obvious at that point. Once I've started off, I am going to just go backwards. I'm picking up the underside of that material, so nothing should be coming through on the top side. Now I'm going to travel downwards, and I've just done picking up the underside, or the upper side, sorry, of that elastic covering. Now I go back and I pick up the underside of the belt tube. I keep doing this. Pick up the top side of the belt covering, and then almost on top of it, I'm picking up the underside of the belt tube. Pick up the top side of the covering. Again, almost on top of it, go back and pick up the underside of the belt tube. And we'll keep doing this. So your stitches are almost on top of each other, but they're on a different part of the material, and that's what's closing the gap. Do also pay attention to where that tail of the thread is, because you don't want to get it stuck on anything. And you can think about this stitch, I think it's technically called a slip stitch. You can think about it like if you were a kid and you were playing that sort of horrific dare that you've sewn your skin. You've just picked up the top layer of your skin you did it with a finger and you showed your mates and it's like, oh, I've got a needle in my skin. But you've just picked up the top layer of skin and it didn't hurt. That's exactly what you're doing with this material. You're taking just a small layer and then going to the other piece that you're closing, and again a small layer, so that none of that needle or thread is penetrating the outside parts of the material. All right, we're going to close off now. I've just made a knot, and I'm going to do that twice. And then I'll just run my needle and thread back along that join so that the tail of my thread will be enclosed and kept a bit more secure. Snip it off. And I have successfully closed the entire gap of that belt tube and kept my belt covering and the elastic in place. And now I'm going over to the other side because I also need to close off this gap of the belt tube. I want to make sure everything's lying flush and as it should be inside of that belt tube. So that's what I'm working on now. Just tugging that in, and I'm also getting the seam of the elastic covering to be running on the edge because that will make it neater. So just manipulate your fabric so it's lying as you want it, as perfect as you can get it before you do your slip stitch. And then of course, once you're ready, you're going to do that slip stitch again on the other side. If you're watching this as a basics, I hope you've enjoyed learning how to make an invisible slip stitch. It can be used to close gaps, and it can also be used to hem so that nothing will come through on the visible part of the material. If you're doing this because you're actually enclosing a belt in a belt tube, then you have been following along with my Super Comfy Waistband series. If you're not watching that, please have a look, because this will be a beautiful series where you're taught how to make comfy, tummy-friendly waistbands using garments that you already own. Enjoy your comfy life.